Thank you for joining us on Newsday, Dr. Bousted. Your thoughts of children going back to school currently? What is the latest guidance?
The latest guidance is that that for secondary school children, they need, during the course of this week, to take 2 lateral flow tests to show that they're negative, and that will be a rolling programme that will be done by the school. So the start for term for many pupils will be delayed while those tests are done, and that in secondary schools now pupils must wear masks not only in the corridors and communal areas, as was the case last term, but also in the classroom. Primary schools, really not many mitigations put in there at all.
So what do you think of this plan?
Well, I'm glad that the government has now finally moved to mask wearing in secondaries, but the plan is inadequate for the scale of the Omicron challenge. And yet again, the new guidance came out 3 days before the start of term. It appears to me that the government's learnt very little from doing too little too late. We still don't have classrooms which you can guarantee are well ventilated, and the 7,000 air purifiers, which the government announced 3 days ago, will do very little because we've got 300,000 classrooms in England, and many of those will be poorly ventilated. And Sage warned last year, it said last year that the government should ensure good ventilation of all classrooms, because we know that this is an airborne disease. So that hasn't happened. It's a last minute announcement, and it's really a gesture. It won't do much. But also, we now have levels of lateral flow testing. Secondary school pupils are meant to test twice a week. The testing numbers are lower now than they were in March and September, and there should have been a public information campaign to convince parents that even though their children probably don't like doing lateral flow tests because it's not very pleasant, that this is really necessary in order to guarantee the continuity of education.
It isn't the only way through, really, though, to actually include children in vaccination programmes.
Well, yes, and we've included secondary school pupils in vaccination programmes, but as I speak, less than half have actually had their first dose. So the other thing that government really should be doing is a public persuasion campaign to get parents to understand how important vaccination rates are. It's quite interesting, actually. The rates of COVID infection for secondary school pupils, nearly half of which have been vaccinated, at the end of December, they were less than for primary pupils, who were the age group with the highest rates of infection. So that shows that vaccination does work, and does work to also suppress you getting the infection, but also suppress transmission.
What
So
age
we
do you
really
think
do
it should
need to
start
get.
at?
Well, I'm not going to say that because I'm not a scientist, and the JCVI agreed. I think they agreed too late to do the injection for secondary pupils. They're looking at the evidence for primary pupils. We know that in America they are giving injections to primary pupils, giving vaccines. When the JCVI makes its decision, and if they recommend it for primary pupils, or if they recommend a second dose for secondary pupils, we will strongly support that, because the evidence is that vaccination does work to suppress transmission and to stop very few young people will become very ill with COVID. It's a disease which affects older people, but it will really stop the chance of you becoming very ill, but it will also suppress transmission.
What has the impact of all this been on students?
I think students are largely very resilient. I think they really want to be in school. They've absolutely, the one thing that we need to understand is that teachers and pupils do not like remote learning. One thing we've learnt during this pandemic is that school is a very important place, not just for academic work, but also for children's social lives, for their mental health, for safeguarding for those children who are vulnerable, for giving free school meals to children who need them. Schools are really important places for society, and the one thing we have to do is keep them open.
Dr. Bousted, thank you very much. Dr. Mary Bousted.